Hello everyone, Sableye here and welcome back to the channel. With the Teal Mask right around the corner, we are looking at some of the Pokemon that are going to be returning to the game. Now, strictly just to outline some of the bases here, this is strictly Pokemon that are returning that used to be a Pokemon that used to be in the decks that are now coming back in this first wave. Nothing new, we're not going to look at anything like that. All the movesets and stuff are going to be speculation entirely. So if you are trying to avoid spoilers, but you are okay with seeing some Pokemon that are coming back and returning, we are going to be looking at those. Otherwise, feel free to tab out of the video. But with that, we're going to jump right into things right now. We've got one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and that is going to be Politoed. Now, Politoed, probably not going to be the best Pokemon returning in this format, but definitely one I really want to mention because it does have some cool tools. And I think the biggest part here is going to be that Drizzle. Now, obviously, Drizzle already in the game because of Pelipper. However, Politoed I think still has some nice niche usage as well. So obviously Pelipper's got that Tailwind, Pelipper's got that 100% accurate Hurricanes. But let's not sleep on my little frog here, okay? So I think one of the big things that Politoed gets that Pelipper doesn't is something like Encore. And Encore is one of those moves that really just kind of forces your opponent to play in ways they may not necessarily want to play. If they want to protect, they're going to have to think twice. If they want to click Fake Out, they're going to have to think twice. Now, Politoed, unfortunately, is not necessarily the fastest Pokemon to be able to take advantage of something like Encore, but you should probably be able to build it to outpace something like an Iron Hands or the like, and because of that, it's going to be able to give you the benefit of just being able to say, hey, your Iron Hands can't click Fake Out here, and if it does, maybe I'm Encoring it next turn, right? So it's just that second guess. Obviously, you don't want to be in front of an Iron Hands, but you're there, right? Still, definitely a cool option, definitely something to consider. Another option that you get is something along the likes of Perish Song. Now, I know the format's really, really aggressive right now, right? The big Flutter Mains. Rillaboom's going to be getting back into this meta as well, right? Just Urshifu going through Protect, so Perish Stall doesn't really necessarily work quite the same. It's really not a great option right now, but it is something I wanted to mention, right? Gothitelle is in the deck, so there are ways to trap people in, right? And maybe you get an early lead, maybe you click Perish Song. I don't think it's a bad fourth move on Politoed in the slightest. I think it's a very cool option as well. And just another one quickly I want to talk about is Icy Wind, right? Like I said, Pelipper gets that speed control. Politoed gets it too. Not quite the same. Once again, you're not going to be going really, really fast with like an Iron Bundle to Icy Wind. It's not going to be that, but it's going to be a nice little slower form of passive speed control, which I definitely think needs to be mentioned when you're talking about Politoed. It's not going to be that immediate speed control. It's not going to be that immediate monster on the field, but I definitely think it has some support tools that really make it worth looking into. Whether or not it holds out in the metagame is yet to be seen, but it's definitely got those options. And one last move I want to talk about is Haze. And just for the Dondozo and stuff, yes, in this case, you're giving Dondozo rain. You don't necessarily want to do it. But if things start trying to set up and stuff, Haze is definitely an option that I can see people trying to utilize Politoed for, right? I don't think Dondozo is necessarily bad or necessarily super, super strong right now. But if it does become a thing where it starts creeping back into the metagame, I could definitely see Haze being an option on Politoed. I would have loved to have Politoed in like Regulation A, where the format wasn't like super high power yet. I think Politoed in Regulation A would have been insane, like insanely strong. But getting it back now, I do still think it's going to see some usage, and I think we're going to jump right over into the next Pokemon now. And something we're going to jump right into right now is going to be Snorlax. Now, I know, Snorlax, is Ursaluna just better? And I think that's something we have to address. And I think at immediate damage output, maybe even a belly drum set, Ursaluna is better. But I think there is something to be said about the move Curse on Snorlax. You are also slower than the Ursaluna as well, so you're probably just moving first in Trick Room with a Pokemon like Snorlax, as opposed to maybe still getting undersped by a few things with the Ursaluna. But Snorlax with Curse is definitely something to be talked about. This is the only move I'm really going to talk about on this Pokemon. I'm not going to talk about too much, but boosting your defenses, or boosting your attack and defense, is actually really, really strong. You get something like Gluttony as well to eat berries, which is really, really cool. And you probably still get access to something like Recycle. So maybe you pair this with like, you probably pair it with a Figgy Berry or something along those lines. Just because you have the Gluttony, meaning you're going to eat that berry a lot faster, which is incredible strong. So perfect. Can't complain about this, right? This is going to get your Figgy Berry. You're going to get Curse, Recycle. You can keep this berry coming back. You get some health. You get some bulk. it's going to be an option. I don't know if it overshadows Ursaluna as that normal Trick Room sweeper, but I definitely think it's something to consider, maybe even on like a non-Trick Room team, but as an answer to the Trick Room teams, because I can definitely see that piloting well, right? Just having that Snorlax sitting there with Curse, Recycle, being annoying, being a nuisance, making sure they got rid of it, while the rest of your team can start doing work. I think it's something to be considered. Don't know how strong it's going to be, but I definitely think it's something to look at going forward as we move into Regulation E. Alright, we're going to move right along here. We've got this everybody's lovable fairy type, right? I'm going to be honest, I don't know too many people that dislike Clefairy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's this secret, like, hatred for Clefairy that I'm not sure about, okay? But when you have Eviolite and you have, I think the big thing here is Friend Guard. Obviously, we've seen Mousehold do things. I don't think you're going to see Clefairy do Mousehold things like the mouse does, right? Obviously, the mouse is more often than not proccing those boosts on the Annihilate, maybe keeping a Goldengo safe because the type synergy is there. I don't think you're going to see that necessarily style of play from Clefairy. I think you're going to see Clefairy on more balancey teams, maybe on some of the hyper offense stuff as well, but it's not going to be a Mon. It's not the Friend Guard Mon that's going to set things up. It's the Friend Guard Mon that is going to keep other pieces alive and keep them alive very, very strong, right? Obviously, Follow Me is an amazing option here. Once again, no different from Mousehold though, right? But you are a little slower, and I think because you can be slower, if you do once again get access to something like the After You, definitely think that can be a really, really strong option, right? Like they set up Trick Room, right? But now all of a sudden, maybe you have Clefairy now beside a Fluttermane, which you can now, after they set up Trick Room, you have After You, while your Specs Fluttermane is still doesn't care about the Trick Room being up because your Specs Fluttermane is still going first, right? I think After You is probably one of those moves that I really want to talk about. Definitely one of those ones that I really wanted to mention here. On top of that, you get stuff like Helping Hand and other support moves. You also get Sing if you really, really want it to be that person. But once again, I think there's other moves. You get Dazzling Gleam, which you can actually hit Urshifu pretty hard, right? Like, Moonblast probably picks off Urshifu Dark consistently, right? Like, I feel like that's a decent option. That's got to be talked about. And now Clefairy with Terra, right? Clefairy was always difficult to take down before. You really kind of needed to hit it super effectively. But now with Terra, you can adapt to things, right? Maybe you can go like a Poison just to resist some Fluttermane stuff, right? Maybe you go switch up. Maybe you go, I don't know, maybe like, I was going to say Ghost, but like, I don't know if Ghost is really accurate there. Maybe you go Water to resist Surging Strikes. That's a good one, right? Or a Grass to resist Surging Strikes and Spore from Amoonguss, right? I definitely think there's options for Clefairy in this meta. I don't know how much it really slows down the pace of the meta with the Friend Guard, and I don't know how much it's really surviving with Eviolite because the defensive stats aren't quite there. But I definitely think this thing is going to see usage, right? We've seen it in the past before, and I can definitely see it creeping back into the metagame again. Okay, keeping things right along with the Eviolite users, we've got Dusclops, guys. And look at those hands. If we know anything about Iron Hands and how big those hands are and how good it is in the game, Dusclops' hands, they're right up there. Okay, they're right up there. They're ready to go. And maybe something to do with how big their hands are correlates to how good they are in VGC. I don't know, but Dusclops, historically, guys, historically speaking, is one of the best, has been one of the better Trick Room setters, so to speak. Right? I don't want to say one of the best because I do think it gets overshadowed by quite a few, but it definitely is right up there in a strong Trick Room setter option, right? And you get Pressure, which is pretty cool because I think that's something to consider. Normally you'd run Frisk, but with open team sheets, you can run Pressure, right? Just make those Surging Strikes, make them only have 8 of them, right? Make them only have 8 of those moves when they hit into you, you know? And I think that's definitely something to be talked about. And I think a big thing here, you get stuff like Pain Split, you get stuff like Will-O-Wisp. Obviously, you get your Trick Room. Obviously, you get Nightshade as well, which I think is a really cool option just because that's a good 50, that's a good chunk of 50 damage onto anything you really want, and it's consistent, right? Something to be talked about. It's definitely something to look at. And like, now you're a Ghost type, right? And like, generally speaking, you need to hit the thing. Like, look at these defenses, right? And keep in mind, that's getting doubled, right? So obviously on these Dusclops, you're going to do that. And then these are getting doubled. And like, your bulk is just insane, right? Obviously the HP stat to make up for that. But with the bulk that you have, and now you have the ability to Terra, right? Okay, well, you were weak to Wicked Blow before. So what if you go Fairy? Fairy type Dusclops, guys, kind of seems good. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest here. Just, what's breaking that? You know, obviously now you get the stuff like the Goldengos that are still going to completely take out their Dusclops. but I do think there is case to be made for just getting rid of the ghost typing, right? Like, you're no longer going to be weak to Shadow Ball. However, ghost type on its own is just amazing. You could, in theory, go be ghost and then Terra normal to get out of the Shadow Ball weakness, which is cool. Like, there's a lot of options here, and I think that really is going to depend on the meta. But I do think with the defensive stats it's going to have, it's got Trick Room. Like I said before, Trick Room is one of the big things. I do have to mention it, guys. I hate it. I hate that I have to mention it, but Ally Switch is an option as well. I have to mention it. I probably could have got away without it, but someone was going to yell at me in the comments. So Ally Switch is there. Willows, you get a lot of really cool support options as well as Trick Room. And I just think it's a really, really strong option and a strong way to get Trick Room up in this metagame. Does it overshadow Cresselia? I don't think so. I think Crest is still your optimal Trick Room setter. But, hey, you know what? Maybe Dusclops does some things, right? Maybe Dusclops can do some things. I think it's definitely an option. I definitely think it's something that needed to be talked about, which is why I'm bringing it up. Okay, moving right along here, we've got Melodic. And honestly, I am a huge Melodic believer. I don't know where it really gets in this format, but I do think being able to Terra really benefits Melodic, right? You obviously have competitive, so like some counterplay to some of those landers that are going around to Yusui and Arcanines as well. Melodic is very, very strong. Now, what a lot of people used to do here is they used to have that whole Coil, Hypnosis set, and Muddy Water, right? And I don't hate that. Like, as weird as it feels, I never thought I'd say that I don't hate this set. But I think something like this with Terra gives you a lot of options. Because my problem with the Coil set before was like you were probably still losing to the things you were losing to anyways, right? The electric type would come in and you lose Melodic, right? But there's not that many electric types right now. The only electric type that you really have to worry about that's worthy of being worried about is Iron Hands. And if you can tear it into something like a grass type here, just to get out of that weakness, and then you go Coil and you get the defense boost up, you're probably beating Iron Hands in a 1v1 over time, depending on, like, because you get Recover, right? You have access to Recover. You have access to something like Leftovers or a Berry if you so choose it, right? So, like, you can get that defense boost. You can get the Muddy Water spam going. I'm not going to recommend Hypnosis. I think you want something like Ice Beam just to really take advantage of if you do get intimidated. Just start dropping some damage out, right? Obviously, Hypnosis definitely an option if you don't really want a fourth move, but a moveset like this, I definitely could see being super, super strong in this meta. Obviously, like I said, you're tearing out of your water type. Maybe you go to like something like a fire type, which isn't bad. I don't see it really making sense, though. I think grass for Melodic makes a lot of sense. Obviously, I think there's other options to consider. Maybe something like a fairy so that you're beating the Dark Urshifus, right? That's definitely an option. But I think right now, Melodic is definitely in an interesting position in this game. Coming into the meta, you also get something, like I said it with Politoed, so I'm going to say it here as well, and it's Haze, right? If setup becomes an option, Haze becomes an answer. And I think that's something to be noted, and I think that's just something to say. Maybe I'm just addicted to the move Haze, right? Hey, maybe I'm just addicted to the Haze, and maybe that's on me, but I do think there's something to be said for the move Haze, right? If people are trying to set up, if setup ever becomes an option, and I say it mainly because of Dondozo, if Dondozo is a thing, Melodic with Haze is going to be decent versus it. There's no doubt there. It's just an option. Maybe you get intimidated, then you can bring in Melodic and you can clear your own attack drop, right? That's always an option as well. So just wanted to bring up Melodic. Definitely think it has an option to creep into the metagame. I don't think it's a terrible look. You also get stuff like, I believe, Life do as well. Don't know how accurate or how strong that's really going to be. But you can probably bulk up the defense stat pretty much here. Just play around with the rest of the numbers. But I think Melodic is definitely a mon to be looked at moving forward into Regulation E. Alright, Komodo time, guys. And this is a Pokemon that has seen usage in the past. Primarily a lot of usage back in 2018 when it had access to that Z move. And it was going to get that boost in every single stat. Now, what I want to bring up is in order to get that boost in every single stat, you need to lose 33% of your health. I believe the move is Clanger's Soul. I don't know what they're going to do or how that's going to affect things into this format. However, you have some decent stats, right? Like, you don't need necessarily speed if you're getting the boosts, right? So I definitely think you have some strong stats. The attacks aren't the highest, but once again, if you're getting the boost off the Clanger's Soul, it's not bad. You also get access to stuff like Iron Defense Body Press, which I definitely think is something that's really, really cool, right? It's definitely not talked about enough. And this is stab body press, keep that in mind, right? Because stab body press hits so much harder than non-stab body press, and it's very funny how hard it hits, right? And you keep this stab when you Terra, right? So you can Terra. I would think in this case you want to go something like a poison or a steel, right? I'm going to just put poison in for now for the sake of the video, but I think just tearing out of your fairy weakness, right? And then you have bulletproof to ignore the Shadow Ball, makes this a really, really strong option to deal with Clefairies. Not the Clefairies, excuse me, to deal with the Fluttermanes, right? Maybe not the Iron Defense Body Press set, right? But you do get stuff like Poison Jab, right? I don't know if you get a Steel move or not, but we'll have to see, wait and see. I don't remember exactly. I don't want to say that you did in the past. I feel like it might have, but I can't really remember accurately. I don't want to just like say that for the sake of it. But you definitely get access to Poison Jab right here, and maybe you get some access to some other new moves as well. So we'll definitely see. I definitely think it's an option, right? You all of a sudden you're walling Fluttermane, which is the most used mon in the format, and you got to think that that's good. You know, you have to think that that's good. Something else to consider is something like Overcoat, because you do become help effectively very, very strong against the opposing Amoonguss. Definitely something to consider right there. But I do think like Iron Defense Body Press has merit, and I do think a setup set with like Clangora's Soul also has merit as well. Definitely something to look at as Regulation E approaches. I think there's something here. I don't know how valuable it's really going to be, because I do still think like if you're Terra hogging as a Komodo, it's a little shaky, but I do still think there's something here, and there's something that can definitely be used. Definitely something to look at moving forward. Like these stats, some of these move options, as well as some decent abilities as well, definitely make Komodo a potential option moving forward. Really, really quickly here, guys. Once again, I am addicted to Mandibuzz. I don't know why. I do like Mandibuzz. I do think it's really, really strong option. Once again, Fluttermane probably invalidates this thing, guys. Okay? Fluttermane and big Urshifu stuff is probably invalidating a lot of what Mandibuzz can do. Even TU probably just torches this thing. So I don't know if it really is going to keep up with the metagame anymore. But it has the defensive stats, right? It is a very strong option. You get stuff like Passive Tailwind. You get stuff like Snarl for the slower teams. If I could type, that would be great. Thank you. Right? You get stuff like this. And stuff like this, it's never going to be bad. You used to get Taunt as well. I'm sure you'll get Taunt again. Foul Play maybe comes back and becomes a thing. You probably get access to something like Knockoff if that becomes a move again. Right? It really just... It's a support piece that's going to be passive and get your Tailwind up to help match opposing Tailwinds and lift some things. Right? You can always tear it out of the Fluttermane. Now, my only main concern with that is if I'm tearing my support piece out of the Fluttermane, I'm going to have to be certain that I'm going to sweep the rest of this game with my other pieces not needing to tear on them. And I think that's where Mandibuzz loses a lot of value here, is that it is just weak to Fluttermane, and it's a support option, right? And when you're the support option, you're weak to Fluttermane. Like, I know a lot of the times, like, Cresselia wants to tear, right, to live things. And Cresselia will tear out of the Fluttermane Shadow Ball weakness. But then you've teared your Cresselia. Is that really worth it? Obviously, sometimes it is. And I think the same can be said here. Is tearing Mandibuzz really worth it? Sometimes it is. And I just don't know if, given the high usage of Fluttermane, I don't know if Mandibuzz needing to tear out of that weakness is really worth it for the rest of the team. Like, yeah, okay, you get a Tailwind up. Yeah, you get a Roost off. Maybe it is worth it. I don't know. But I definitely wanted to bring up Mandibuzz because I do think it has these support options. And as a balanced player myself, Mandibuzz is this option, right? It's that passive option. It's that bulky option. It's going to be able to do damage back with Foul Play. It's going to support the team with Taunt and Snarl. It's got Tailwind, right? That's a balanced option that has some speed control, that has some control over the board state that I really like seeing. And it was really good in like 2017 as well. I just worry that the format might be a little bit too strong for it right now and forcing a Terra, which obviously loses a lot of value. But had to say it, had to bring it up. I do like Mandibuzz. I think it's a decent option. Okay, guys, we are going to close this one out with Alolan Ninetales. Now, I'm going to preface this with, I'm not certain if this is actually confirmed or not. I know regular Ninetales is confirmed. I am not certain if Alolan Ninetales is confirmed. However, Snow Warning, now with a Snow Boost. Seems pretty good to me, right? Ninetales has some stats, okay? Like, obviously the defense isn't amazing, but that gets doubled. That gets doubled because, or is it 1.5? I think it's 1.5 because of snow. Yeah, it's 1.5. It's like sand. Yeah, so it's 1.5 because of snow. And that's respectable, right? You build this thing nice and bulky, and you have moves, right? You get access to stuff like Blizzard. You get access to stuff like Freeze Dry. You get access to stuff like the Fairy moves now that are going to beat these Urshifus that generally want to beat your Ice types, right? Like maybe you go with Dazzling Gleam, maybe you go with a Moonblast, right? Obviously your special attack, very, very sad, right? Which is why I like Ninetales as a supportive piece. You get stuff like Icy Wind, you get stuff like Encore, as I mentioned on Politoed. But this is a faster Encore now, so there's a lot more things that can no longer set up in front of you now, which I think is something to be said, right? You can now tear it out of being like you're scared of steel types. Okay, I'm a water type now. Nice try. You know, you're gonna get the move that I haven't even mentioned yet is Aurora Veil, right? So you're setting up screens, and like you're fast. You're going to be getting these screens up a lot of the time as long as you have control of the weather. And I think that's something to be said for the rest of the team. Ninetales has potential to be one of the best support Pokemon moving forward, I think. I really, really do, right? Because you're switching weathers as well. Maybe you're going up against a rain team. Well, now they don't get their rain boost. In fact, you're going to get a defense boost if you switch to Ninetales in after, right? I think there's something to be said for Ninetales. Also, interestingly enough, it kind of does a good job versus Shenpao. Now that I'm looking at this Ice Fairy typing, right? You're neutral versus the Sacred Sword, but you've got the defense boost, so it's probably not too bad. You probably take that pretty well. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Ninetales just sucks. Maybe Shenpao is like overpowered, but you resist the dark. You resist the ice. It's an interesting option into Shenpao. You hit it back with your fairy moves as well. Like I do think like an option where you run like Dazzling Gleam, Icy Wind, Aurora Veil, Encore, or something along those lines is a decent moveset, right? Maybe you don't even need the ice move. Maybe you pair this with something like an Iron Bundle, but we're not talking about cores and stuff like that right now. But like I do think something along these lines is a really, really strong option for Ninetales. I just think you probably want Blizzard. Just freezes are never going to be a bad thing, guys. You probably want Blizzard. It's a very strong option. It makes up for the fact that your special attack isn't very high. But Ninetales Alola, if it does make its way into the game, has to be mentioned. It's going to see usage. People are going to try and use it. I think it's a very, very cool Pokemon. And just having that fast support ability, set up the rest of your team with Veil, set up the rest of your team with Encores, and Icy Wind as well. And that's another option that needs to be mentioned here for this Pokemon. But I'm going to wrap up this video right here, guys. These are kind of the mons that I wanted to mention a lot. And some other honorable mentions like Conkeldur's coming back. I think that could be really, really cool. I don't know if it really overshadows anything. I don't know if it really does much. Once again, being weak to Fairy, being weak to Fluttermane really sucks in this format right now, just because Fluttermane is like on almost every team, right? Like, so Conkeldur's an honorable mention. What else was there? I feel like Poliwrath shouldn't really be a mention here, but like there's some things, right? Like I went over most of them, right? But like Conkeldur's one that I really didn't go over, that I probably maybe should have. But I don't know, being weak to Fluttermane doesn't really strike me as like, yeah. But if you guys think there's any Pokemon that are guaranteed and confirmed to be returning that I've missed, feel free to leave a comment down below. Would like to hear your thoughts on that. But with that, guys, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for checking out the video. If you guys do enjoy this content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help with the channel, and I do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in a future video.